Hello there, and a very warm welcome to this edition of the Citizens Chat Show here on Civic Space TV, streaming on YouTube. If you haven't already liked us, please do and subscribe to this channel and also drop us a comment. Today we are having an interesting conversation. Our topic for today is the Kawempe By-Election and the NRM plan to reintroduce the trial of civilians in military courts. And I'm pleased to be joined by my usual guests from my immediate left, Dr. Robert Ojambo, head of the History Department at Kyambogo University. Doctor, good afternoon and welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, thank you.
Dr. Sarah Bireete, Executive Director, Center for Constitutional Governance. Don't give me a serious look. Good afternoon, Doctor, and welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, Andy. Good afternoon, viewers. Glad to be back.
Thank you. Next to Dr. Sarah is Honourable George Odongo, a member of the East African Legislative Assembly, representing Uganda. Honourable, good afternoon and good to have you on the show.
Thank you so much.
And last but not least is Mr. Joseph Ochieno, who is a political commentator. He's also a UPC ideologue. Joseph, always a pleasure to have you on the show.
And good afternoon, and I'm saddened that I'm not seated in the middle somewhere today.
Of course, missing today's Major, who hopefully will be joining us some other time. Well, as you all know, the race for the Kawempe North parliamentary seat is heating up. 13 candidates picked up nomination forms, and on Wednesday this week, the Electoral Commission started the nomination exercise. But on the first day of the nomination exercise, 3 candidates had been nominated, and this independent Hanifa Karadi, who is running on an independent ticket after losing the NRM party flag to Farida Nambi. The other 2 candidates who were nominated on Wednesday are Mohamed Luswa Luwemba, who is a former personal assistant to the late Mohamed Segirinya, and lawyer Arias Nalukola of the National Unity Platform. But also the late Segirinya belonged to NUP, and so did his assistant Luwemba. And Luwemba also, as you know, lost the NUP flag to Nalukola. But like Hanifa Karadi, he also opted to run on an independent ticket. And having said that, day 1 of the nomination was marred by reports of kidnapping. Nalukola's official election agent was allegedly abducted in the morning. There was also heavy security deployment at the EC offices in Kawempe, including by counter-terrorism police and the military. There were reports of skirmishes when security officials blocked Nalukola from accessing the EC offices on grounds that he had arrived way ahead of his scheduled time for nomination. But also going by the 2021 elections, if there's anything we read from that, Kawempe North, just like most parts of central Uganda, voted NUP, and for a lot of people it is still considered an NUP stronghold. But also what's worth noting is that last week alone we saw several reports of NUP members being kidnapped or abducted. The NUP headquarters was also raided by security operatives. And of course, there are lots of fears and concerns growing about this recent wave of kidnappings and what exactly they portend for our politics going forward. And I think just with that background, it brings me to our first question, which is, when you look at this kind of environment that we are witnessing, the intimidation, what does it tell us about the credibility of elections? And of course, when we're talking about credibility, we're not looking at just the outcome, but we're also looking at the processes leading to the outcome of these elections. If I'm to start with you, Dr. Ojambo.
Yeah, Judith, thank you. But before I go to your topic of the day, I just want to share with the viewers and listeners 2 very sad incidences that have happened in our country. The first one happened yesterday, where a man called Agaba, just from nowhere, went and lit a fire on himself in front of Parliament. And the most important thing is not the man burning himself, but how the issue has been taken. This man allegedly came with a bottle of petrol, poured on himself when everybody was watching, and he lit a matchbox and he started burning. This is something I've been talking about on this show for so long, that when people reach an extent of suicide mission, then you know that a country is in trouble. That matter needs to be investigated properly, because what I have seen being reported about it is sheer propaganda, which I cannot believe in. And they are trying to associate it to NOP and NRM relationship, which I don't think can be an issue. I think it needs to be uh, and the most serious thing is when this matter was brought to the floor of parliament, the way it was treated, I felt that really people don't care about human life. And somebody burning himself at in front of parliament is not just a life, but is talking. That is a loud message to Uganda. So we don't want to see what has been happening in Arab world, where there is these suicide bombers and suicide mission, because many children who watched the thing yesterday are going to start trying to imitate it, and we need to see how we stop it. The second huge public event is that for now, close to 2 weeks, public universities are not operational. Kyambogo University, Busitema University, MAST, Gulu University, and others, with the exception of Makerere. In Makerere, they have managed to put a state administration there, so people are teaching on gunpoint. In Makerere University, you have to teach. There is a camera to watch you. If you don't, the police comes and picks you, or they give you a warning. It is the only one which has succeeded. But for me, that is not my surprise. My surprise is that, university education is one of the most important activities in our country here, because it is at the university that now we complete our education cycle. So anybody who struggled to go to nursery, to primary, to lower secondary, upper secondary, the target is to go to the university. And with our education system, that's when somebody creates a profession or finishes the the education cycle. But it looks like government is not bothered. So they are not bothered. 2 weeks, universities are just now tourist centers. Students come, the staff are not there because of their harmonization, something which started in 2015, where it should be complete and nobody should be still arguing about it. But nobody cares. The permanent secretary of public service is just writing letters threatening. But you threaten university officers? I don't think there is anybody in this country who understands the law like university people. Because in the university, the last person employed there is a Form 4. Form 4 graduate is the one who is employed there. So we really think that in this country, before we go into election, there are some of the things that are happening that point to a wrong direction of a country. A country that is not bothered about its education is a country that is not bothered about its future. Because the people now who are loitering are the ones you intend to help this country go to the next level in economic development, in the industrial, I don't know what, all the things we hear, Vision 40, and so on and so forth. Without educated people and well-educated people, these are just rhetorics. But now let's come to election. By-elections generally in Uganda, the last 5 years, 10 years, have been chaotic. There is no by-election that has taken place in the recent time that has been peaceful. And it is because of the stake that normally we put in these by-elections. Sometimes you wonder. NRM, for instance, has the biggest number of MPs, but how they treat a by-election is a do and die. But sometimes you want to imagine that the issue is not just an election. The issue is a show off. So the issue of Kawempe, which is a sure deal, really, under normal circumstances. The person who is going to go through there is an opposition MP. There is no doubt, unless something miraculously really happened because of the environment there. But you see, it is mixing with the political developments that are taking place between NOP, NOP and government. And you see the problem with Uganda, that government has problems with parties. In other places, it wouldn't be the case. Before that, you remember, there was that issue of the offices, where there were people who wanted to enter the NUP offices, but they did not. And I remember one time there was almost a garrison in Kubiri there. Then it went slowly. Then the birthday thing just summed it up. Yesterday I was watching a video of an old man who was one of the people who marched on that birthday thing. And I looked at him carefully, put in a lot of things. This man was asking that they are looking for me, they want to arrest me. He was putting on, for young people, you know, this shoe called Timberlake. He was putting on a Timberlake shoe, then his overall and his cap. And he asked, of these that are put on, which one is for the army? And therefore, we used to march when we are small young people in Scout. Why were they not arresting us? I have never declared myself that I am an army man. So when you arrest me, please don't beat me up. Just chop me into small pieces. I am ready to die, but don't beat me up so that I feel the pain. Of course, that was followed by the raid of NUP offices. And for me, I feel very bad without being biased with any party. I don't think that in this era, police should be going to an office at night unless there is a bomb there or that they are looking for evidence. And if it was police, it would even be better. But the people I saw on video and on TV, they were army-looking people. What is army men doing to a political party? Then, of course, this week, as you have led us in your statement, nomination. I looked at Nalukola after nomination. I was developing some interest in politics. I've now lost even the little I had. I rather go and become a slave in some plantation somewhere than being treated the way they treated Nalukola. You know, Nalukola is this humble man. Even how he talks, he's not a man who can threaten anyone. They got the man. By the time he left the cells, he did not have his coat. His coat has disappeared. The shirt was deformed. In fact, the whole of this part was torn, and he was looking like a madman. His hands were swollen and bruised. Now, why then do we have an election? They should abolish these elections. And they appoint RDC this, RDC this, so and so. You are the MP for Kawempe, go. You are the MP for the other place, so that they allow us to do our work. For you said that the man was stopped when he was coming. The man had organized that after being nominated, he was going to address a rally, and I think which is legitimate. He was going to address a rally in one football pitch in Kawempe there, that famous place where they play football. So when he attempted to go there, the police told him that he cannot go there. So the man decided to board a border to go to NUP office. A drone came and he was kidnapped and taken to police, detained for 4 hours, released later in the evening. So you find that why do they turn election to be a battleground? In my view, it is just to threaten people, to threaten serious people to shun politics and leave it to whom it may be. Then the last thing is that I want to see whether there will be today the same thing. Selective treatment. For example, the lady who is taking the flag for Kawempe has even been already campaigning. She has been moving around. She has been holding rallies before.
Which ticket?
NRM. NRM is a lady. But you know, this lady is a daughter to a big person in the NRM, in fact, number 2 in the NRM. And we want to see whether for her, after nomination, she will not speak to anybody. So for me, I find that very funny, and it creates a very big problem to our election. So for me, I think what is happening in Kawempe is just a precursor of what is going to happen in the next election. In fact, whatever you are seeing in Kawempe will happen in the forthcoming election. And the target is to scare away anybody who wants to oppose, anybody who wants to say that I don't agree with this, and which in a democracy is the wrong thing to do. For me, I have told you that if there is a man I have read a lot about is Yoweri Museveni. Yoweri Museveni only genuinely stood for elective post when he was campaigning for HP in Intare, an election that he lost very badly, and he caused a lot of commotion until they had to create something called Scripture Union Chairman, and that's what they gave him for free to settle down. Since then, every time the election, this man has become a leader, he has been unopposed or sole candidate. The leader of Fronasa, there was no election. There is no record anywhere that when they formed Fronasa, there was an election and he became the leader. Nothing. UPM, when they formed the UPM, he formed it and became the leader. NRA and the others, NRM, when they formed it, there is no record that there was an election and there was a nomination. He became the leader. The first election he went through was in 1996, which he wanted to be alone. The 1981, he just came in. He knew he had no chance. He was just measuring. But in 1996, and that's why you see, they talk about 1980.
Robert, I'm going to ask you to wind up.
Yes,
so
I'm finishing. They talk about 1980 election, but electoral violence, for me, that the one I observed, it started in 1996. I remember this Semugerere man was not allowed to go to places like Rukungiri and others until the most, for me, I think the most strong electoral commission chairman, Aziz Kasuja, declared that if Semugerere is touched again, I am going to cancel these elections. That's how he was allowed. So the thing has gone on and it is going to worsen because there are some people who have a phobia for election. They want to go for an election which they must win. That's not the good thing of election. You must go in an election winning or losing.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Sarah, your quick thoughts. The credibility of our elections and the processes that lead to the outcomes of these elections.
Well, for me, the Kawempe by-election is just a curtain raiser for what citizens should expect in 2026 elections. You have the deployment of Joint Anti-Terrorism Task Force, which is dominated by the Army, on the nomination center in civic elections, in civilian elections. You have the abduction of the chief agent for one of the candidates, Council Narukola, with all official documents, signatures, and the rest, as he was on his way to the nomination center. You have, of course, what Dr. Ojambo talked about, the manner of arrest of a nominated candidate, the brutality. About 5 people were shot in that scuffle, including a top TV journalist. They are recovering in Nsambya Hospital, most of them. You wonder, what is it? Why deploy, crowned soldiers with masks at a nomination center? What was the terror threat? First of all, what was the threat? If Narukola was going to address an illegal rally, like it has been claimed, did the security agencies use proportional force as required to disperse unarmed civilians? The 3 drones that were packed for kidnapping, abducting people. So what is the intention of security? What is the intention of the regime in this by-election? So you have security, and I think these people that we see that are masked, they are wearing a monkey face. I've never seen any official agency wearing a monkey face. So they are openly telling citizens that we are here now to play monkey games. Yeah, because we first saw this monkey face when Besje was produced at Nakawa for those treason charges. Now the monkey faces were many at the nomination. So they are saying are you saying our elections are monkey business? What are you saying? What is the message? Two, is Uganda under terror alert? If so, why can't Parliament be notified so that the whole country is notified that we are now under terror alert and this is how we must conduct our affairs? Why deploy the Joint Anti-Terrorism Task Force in elections? And I wish we could see the faces of these people. They should be sued for violating the sovereign rights of Ugandans to engage in political campaigns. The second issue, other than security, is the mentality of the Electoral Commission. The current Electoral Commission thinks their job is technical. They are behaving like the old-time secretaries who would concentrate on a typewriter to the extent that even if you are talking to them for clearance to see their bosses, they would not even look at your face. Typewriter, the noise it would make. I know young people don't know these typewriters. So we have Electoral Commission behaving like typewriter operators. They think their job is technical. We have nominated tick box. We have delivered ballots tick box. They think the quality of election does not concern them. Yet Article 61A is very clear. Ensure that free and fair elections are held. This is a directive of the Constitution. Functions of Electoral Commission. Ensure. Ensure is an operative word. And I want to read the meaning. Make certain that something will occur. So to what extent does Electoral Commission make certain that Ugandans are going to enjoy free and fair, credible elections? When you talk to Justice Byabakama, he says, I'm not in charge of security. Security must do its job if there are all enforcement issues. So we should start crafting that response of Justice Byabakama.
Doctor, just to catch you, a lot of times on this show we've talked about the institutional state capture and the fear within which the institutions in this country and the heads and the people who work in these institutions actually operate. Do you think to a certain degree this could actually manifest in the way the EC is actually handling business around this time of elections?
You see, Judith, there is an old adage that nobody can climb your back unless it's bent. Nobody can climb your back when you're standing straight. So if these people have decided to bend their backs so that they are run over by the deep state, we are not here to apologize for them. They have a job to do, and I'm calling them out based on their job prescribed by the Constitution. I don't want to be part in their bent backs that I climbed over by deep state. So if the Constitution says ensure that free and fair elections are held, what does it mean? Electoral Commission, their mindset is to say, that's not our business. They did the same in 2021. The same mentality now the staff of Justice Byabakama have carried this script. That's not our business. So we need to seek interpretation of the functions of the Electoral Commission. What does it mean when the law says the Electoral Commission must ensure that free and fair elections are held? What does it mean? What is the job of the Electoral Commission? Is it the old typewriter that have delivered materials, have nominated people? the rest doesn't concern me. Is it what the Constitution means? And we need to call them out because they are in charge of elections. When security takes part in an electoral exercise, security must act under electoral commission. But for them, they've distanced themselves from this obligation to hoodwink Ugandans for their failures. And I'm saying Ugandans should not accept this from Justice Byabakam and their team, that they are just like robots and they don't have a duty to deliver a credible, free and fair election. The other challenge, as I conclude, is failure of internal party mechanisms. Each party has independent candidates. So independent candidates signify failure of internal democracy. NRM has not held primaries. They sat and decided who to give a flag. And as a result, they have 2 candidates in the race. NUP held the debates, candidates debates, and they said they were also going to do other mechanisms of establishing who is the most popular candidate. They have 3 candidates in the race. So what does this mean? These are the major parties. If you have NRM with 2 candidates, they are going to divide their vote. You have NUP with 3 candidates, they are going to divide their vote. And these are major weaknesses of multi-party dispensation that should be addressed by these parties.
Thank you. Honourable George Odongo, the events that we see surrounding this Kawempe by-election are not new events to us. We're pretty much seeing the same script happening now, but the same script has played out in the past, whether it's a by-election in Kisoro or somewhere else, or even in past general elections. Your 2 colleagues here say what we are seeing is just a curtain raiser or a precursor for what is to come in 2026. Do you agree or not?
Well, all our elections, I think starting with 1996, not that much, 2001, from 2001 to date, I think most of the elections that have taken place are steeped in a very, very bad political culture. As a country, we have not developed our political culture to be able to sustain competition. So the culture of competition is very alien. In fact, to assume that we are in a multi-party dispensation is really a joke, because the kind of formations that we see are largely are not principled. They are not deeply ideological, as would be the case in a typical political party competition. It's the reason why, in spite of the weaknesses in our internal democracies, we see that every party comes off with more than 1 candidate in the end of what you would consider a primary. For NRM, where there are by-elections, our party constitution is such that the person who was the flag bearer and who lost in that particular constituency, assuming that that constituency is held by any other political, the person who contested as a flag bearer continues to be a flag bearer. And therefore, in the event of a by-election, it is the same person who is fielded as a flag bearer. So it is easier for NRM to identify who their flag bearer is. However, there have been cases where flag bearers have been changed, and I think that is where there is some element of instability within the party, and that needs to be addressed. But that is the case also for many of other political parties. There are no credible internal political processes that inspire confidence in their party membership, so that, you know, a candidate who comes out as the flag bearer is in it. So these are the things that actually motivate anger, and sometimes it deteriorates into violence. Now, the violence that you see is not the way it has been characterized in the submissions of my two colleagues. It looks like it's targeting only those in the opposition. Actually, violence has become it's deeply ingrained in our politics. Even in constituencies where it is purely NRM people contesting, you would see elements of political violence.
But what's documented, I think, is that we see that the opposition bears the brand more than the ruling party candidates.
Well, I'm yet to look at that specific report, but I want to address myself to the character of our politics nationally, and to show you that, you know, over the years, violence has become part and parcel of our politics, and we have got to address it the way it is. And by the way, I think it is because we got into multi-party politics prematurely. The country didn't transition very, very well. It looked as though they just imposed multi-party into Uganda because political parties were in abeyance up to 2005. And during that time, there was no political activity for it even to mature. So most of the political organizations that have registered since then are really not those that are born out of conviction. So the character of these political organizations is the one that has predisposed us into a culture of political violence, because tolerance is not part of it. We are not socialized into understanding that you can enter into a political competition and treat it as a competition. The other one is the military ingredient to it. I think some of you my two colleagues have pointed it out. I think the weaponization of our state institutions by people, the abuse of it, it's not something that is an official position. But I think that there are people who have taken who are in privileged positions and abuse those positions and weaponize their privileged positions and use it during elections to gain advantage for candidates of their choice. I think that has got to be addressed. I remember during the last NRM caucus, a member of the caucus actually addressed this matter to the president of the wooded
the masked military
men, and the president took exception of that. He was very, very clear. He said that should not happen. If you are a policeman or you are a soldier, you should be identified because you are you're a public servant for that matter. And if your deployment is meant for purposes of providing security, then people should be able to identify who you are. What is it about you masking your face? So this masking of faces and so on, again, as I said earlier on, is because we have abused some of these institutions. And these are things that we as citizens have got to really confront and have a very decent conversation about how we can polish our electoral process.
In that particular meeting, did you have representatives from the UPDF in Parliament attend?
The representative of the UPDF don't attend.
The
caucus.
NRM caucus?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Joseph, thank you, Honourable. Yeah, we are still talking about the credibility of the elections and whether this is a curtain raiser for what's to come in 2026.
This is a military one-party state, and it has been since 1986, and it hasn't changed. The attempts to give it some kind of colorings, the attempts by decent people like George to try and help make it something which is viable, credible, edible, and one that is able to push us as a country forward continues to be thwarted by the various agents, again, that George suggests, that men and women who push impunity. And we also have, George, some of your colleagues in NRM who are very unapologetic about the fact that they don't believe in pluralist polity. And I think that seems to be the majority of the people who are close to real power in NRM, which is very unfortunate. I had just turned of age in 1980. Sarah, my constituency, Toro South Central at the time, it's now it's made up of 4 constituencies, was amongst the most contested parliamentary seats in the East.
It's now 4.
In now 4. Amongst the most contested in the East and North. It's a parliamentary constituency in which UPC got just over 70% of the votes, but DP got a very decent, just over 25% or thereabouts. The DP candidate went on to join FEDEMU, the then Uganda-based bandit organization, rebel movement, and that candidate actually 2-3 years later was actually killed in combat. So that is my parliamentary constituency. But now that is the nearest of the violent element of polity at the time. Now, I can tell you that as very young, excited little boys from Bireete, we used to go to attend rallies. We never saw violence. We never saw violence. Come elections, we never saw security people. I went to vote at Mahanga Primary School at Nagongre Town Center. And if I can recall, it was absolute fun. But it was the most contested constituency in that sub-region. And as I said, the DP candidate who garnered substantial votes went on to join a rebellion that mixed up with the NRA, actually got killed in combat, but that was it. So we could actually generally suggest that beyond 1980 general elections, we really never had any form of general elections. That's why I always challenge my NRA friends that we need to revisit this, you know. And why I'm saying that, Judith, is because those 1980 general elections were used as a basis by Museveni to go to the bush. And part of the argument is basically what we're discussing. I don't see how merely by-election, and I will not say much, since my colleagues already said, I'll just give the principal heads as we continue. Why would you have masked men go to kidnap candidates? And why would masked men go and kidnap the candidate of the official democratic opposition? And tell me that actually that is really not provocative and just here in Kawempe. And as it happens, it's a very solid opposition, in this case, NUP, a solid base. And that is here in Buganda. And with the tongue in the cheek, I suggest Buganda gave these NRM bandits the base on which they used rather ruthless military power to overthrow a democratically elected government. So really, actually, NRA has got every reason, regardless of their differences with Buganda, in this case, NUP, whatever, to treat Buganda and Bugandan soil and Buganda, and I'm not tribalizing, some people really put a genuine context, you know, with some semblance of respect, restraint. But if Mr. Museveni can treat Besigye this way, possibly. But so I'm generally disappointed. Now, I told this program that I went for the video for Sigri, and you could actually see the heat, the anger. And guys in power, particularly guys who are now practicing politics of impunity and some kind of entitlement, guys who treat, you know, I think it's Justice Owindolo, Chief Justice, by the way, the other week, I was at Muchwini, at Janan Doom's home on Janan Doom's Day. I was glad this time I was around and managed to go. Very important. Lewum is a saint. Lewum died and dead Idi Amin. And Lewum, you go there and you see the surrounds of Muchwini. and you see how many countries Uganda have economically and politically. But Justice Owindolo, together with the head of the Anglican Church, for the first time the head of the Anglican Church was quite impressive on matters of tolerance, love, reconciliation. Owindolo was actually addressing the state that, look, this Besigye guy thing, you guys could do better. I don't want to go into the too much politics with it, but actually I acknowledge that he quite impressed me on that. But the most important thing Owindolo said there, why I bring this, George, is that all of us own this country. All of us own this country. And it was very emphatic. So really, I don't know. I know we're discussing a Kawempe by-election. There is absolutely no business for police officers to turn up, even merely police officers, at the scene. But if they must, surely let it be civilian, mainstream police. And if it is the so-called Joint Anti-Terrorism Force, I was with on a different television network last night with a friend of mine who's formerly close to NRA, but attempted to argue that there may be more than meets the eye about what's going on, tries to link the situation in Congo and the fact that maybe some of these candidates may be associated with some other activities other than former democratic stuff. Now, if they are, let the state, just like in Kizza Besigye's case, if you have an issue, if you have evidence, get hold of the guy, and parade him through the formal process of the courts. So if it's a candidate, those three things you call them drones. I normally don't like using those because I'm trying to, but of course that's the word. What do drones about? What have they got to do?
Matatu vehicles.
With by-elections. So anyway, short bit of it is basically, as I said, it's a military dictatorship. It is basically, in my opinion, an intimidation thing. I think because the by-election in Buganda maybe is a sign of things to come, people might argue. But I think it's also generally a psychological thing that we are prepared to battle this, so it will not be business as usual in the next 12 months, which is really generally unfortunate. And then finally, for the chairperson of the Electoral Commission to continuously say that security issue is a matter for them, the security. No, you actually should technically, as public servants, be taking charge of the electoral process, including whether or not you're the ones who seek support from security services, as it were. And it should not be anything else. But in any case, I think the fact that the presidential powers have been used and abused anyhow, meaning that the chairperson of the Electoral Commission is an appointee, and they've got to do their jobs, but to do their jobs basically to sustain and perfect the dictatorship. That said, remember, chairperson of the 1980 general elections, whatever happened at that time, and now we are far away from where we are to them. Anyway, you guys, we hope. One point I wanted to make was that one of Sarah of the internal democracy issue, whether or not it is about parties to blame. I suspect not. I think it's basically the political culture, George. Uganda National Congress was founded in 1952. By 1960, 10 years later, they had their own internal conflict. They guided us as a nation state, clarity in terms of vision and ideology. DP was founded 2 years later. We were able to go into independence as mature political parties with an independence political party and an opposition party, including KY, which was founded weeks and months before an election, and it was sort of okay. I do not think that the political parties going to abeyance is the issue. The issue is the climate in which political parties have found themselves. In any case, NUP came up, and it did not take a long time but it is now the largest political opposition party. Whether or not they have the leadership clarity and vision and values to persuade majority of Ugandans is a slightly different thing.
You talked, yeah, please.
There is this thing that you will find it in the public domain, that police or any other military agencies intervene, to tilt the balance in favor of NRM. We have had intense internal party discussions around the interventions of the security in our elections. And where the elections are delicately poised, in those constituencies where elections are delicately poised, in fact, the intervention of the police or any other security agencies usually is to the disadvantage of an NRM candidate because, one, there is anger generally in the public. Why is there interference in our citizen choices? It's not selective. Okay. Two is that sometimes people just fear to come for the elections. They fear to turn up for the elections. And you find in the end, an NRM candidate has lost in a constituency that would otherwise have been won comfortably by an NRM person. So the elephant in the room is actually for us to try and address the issue of militarization of our politics. I think it is not an essential ingredient in our elections. If at all security is to intervene, as has always been the case, and the justification that has always been, then the terms of deployment have got to be very clear. And the Electoral Commission, as Sarah said, should really be part and parcel of that discussion, so that it's very clear where and as to when there's need for security. But really, where people are exercising their right, they are campaigning, I don't see that. I can tell you something. Of all manifestations of power, restraint is the most powerful.
That's true.
Yes, but I think, Honourable, it would be good if you tell the viewers whether your leader has that powerful tool of leadership, restraint. And if you discuss that security does not tilt the balance in favor of NRM, it's the reverse. Is your chairman, who is the commander-in-chief in these meetings, and what does he say about disruption of our democracy by security forces?
Well, I think he has spoken for himself, and many times you have listened to the president when he has addressed even matters of our own politics. He actually has said there was a time when he even blamed policemen. Don't you remember there was a time when the president even came out openly to blame policemen for some of the losses that the party has incurred in some of the places. But I don't want again to just get to NRM I just want us to address the elephant in the room that affects all of us. I can tell you, me as a member of NRM, I don't feel good when I see violence meted out because I really want to have a decent election where the outcomes of the elections are respected by everybody. That's what a legitimate elections is all about. So it is not about me, it's not about Nupis, it's about us as citizens. We must get violence out of our elections.
Thank you. We have seen when the president feels strongly about something, that conversation will not just end in a caucus discussion with members of his ruling party. He will come out and actually give a directive, make a pronouncement and say, effective this moment, I direct. We do not seem to see that strong voice, that directive coming out. And so from a point of, say, an observer like her and your colleagues here, it might seem like he is talking, he's just saying it because probably he wants to be quoted that I said so, but he does not really mean it. I don't know if you could just give us some clarity, just a little bit of your sense. What is the sense you get when you sit with him? Does he have that deep commitment, and how far is he willing to go to actually ensure that there's a directive to get the military out of the politics?
To walk the talk.
I don't know how you would want me to measure the commitment of the president.
Just from your sense, yes.
What I have heard him say, you know, he has come out very, very openly many times to say he does not want to see the police or any other interfering in our elections. Some of the actions of these police and security agencies is really by overzealous commanders, and that's why I call it an abuse of those who are in charge of these institutions. And it is for all of us to say. But they are also very case specific. You know, I think there is what we should also consider as political responsibility, even in terms of our own political rhetoric. You see, if you go in an election and you amplify ethnic identities and try to, you know, try to cause ethnic passions, and therefore you want to use that narrative of ethnicity for your candidature for your candidate to gain traction, then I think you become a legitimate interest of those who are managing the state, because then we also have responsibility as politicians to really polish the message that we communicate to our people. Mm-hmm. But those are exceptions. Those are really exceptions to the general rule. What I'm telling you now is that the militarization of our politics has become so much ingrained in our political culture, and we really have got to do something about it. Whether or not it is Kawempe elections, 2026 is coming here, and we shall be in this talk show again, and you will see it all over the place. So there has got to be consensus, a national consensus, that we get the military and the police and so on out of our elections, and only have them deployed for purposes of ensuring a free and secure competition.
Mm-hmm. Sarah, you want to say something? Let me first get to Sarah. Yeah. I'm coming back to you. Sorry, Doctor, I've skipped you for a while. I was watching your interview with Solomon Seranja on the hard questions, and we've also had this conversation here when you went to observe the Ghana elections last year. And I think one of the things that stood out for you was the absence of the military. What did Ghana do differently, or what do they do differently that we can actually learn from as a country? Because we are now grappling with the question of how do we actually get the military out of our politics.
Well, I don't know what point to compare, at what level to compare Uganda with Ghana. Whereas we had, or we share the history of turbulence after independence, because we shouldn't again keep using that. You know, usually when the president is talking, he wants to rub it in, you know, where, when we came, you know, where we found you. But how did we even go to that point? They were the major actors. So when Ghana overcame that turbulence of coups, they were determined as a nation to promote and develop their democracy. They put the army out. I don't want to mention the issue where generals were killed. I'm not saying we should kill people, but it happened in Ghana. Because under Jerry Rawlings, yes, I don't know whether he did it as a person or not, but it's a story in Ghana that Jerry Rawlings, after the first coup, he cleared the generals, then handed back those who had caused the mess in politics, then handed back the power to elected civilian. 2 years, the elected civilian failed, he came back. 10 years, they did a constitution, the same way we did with the 1995 constitution. Same period, 9, 8, 10 years. So after the constitution, which had term limits, Jerry Rawlings ruled for another 2 terms and handed over power. And Ghana has never looked back. So if you compare with our trajectory, one, we institutionalized presence of military in our politics with a presence in parliament. Whereas that would have been okay when we were still in the movement system, non-partisan, in courts, because people had the complaints. Not everybody was on the same page.
I never was there.
Yeah. So, but when we returned to multi-party, we should have had a clear departure of the army from parliament. Why do I say so? The army under Article 208 of the Constitution is required to be non-partisan. What is it doing in a partisan arena? On which side do they sit? We have two sides, ruling party, opposition. Which side does the army sit? And is it still non-partisan or not? Why does it sit with the executive and not with the ruling party and not opposition? And where do they vote? They always vote with NRM. So how can they keep pretending that they are non-partisan? They are not. They are NRM supporters. They are NRM MPs. The uniform is just a cover to manipulate the numbers in parliament. We need to get that army out of parliament. The second issue where we lost track compared to Ghana was removal of term limits. We institutionalized life presidency. Ghana, on the other hand, made a clear turn and institutionalized peaceful political handover of power, a miracle that we have never seen in this country. We destroyed our constitution, made one man a life president. This life president keeps himself in power using two elements, money and violence. I know that there are areas where he's popular, like Busheni, where he went on a Western Uganda, he's on a PDM tour. He has been in other parts of the country. But in Western Uganda, because he has a reasonable majority, it turned into a campaign rally with posters of Vote Museveni shamelessly using taxpayers' money to campaign under the guise of PDM. Vote Museveni from my district, Busheni, now Rwampara, tomorrow is another district. Ministers parading themselves, Honourable and others, Vote Museveni, a PDM tour, please. Stop abusing taxpayers' money and stop abusing the sanity of Ugandans. So you have this dilemma of a permanent presidency that has now eroded all the gains of our democracy. That's the difference with Ghana.
Thank you. Robert.
Now, Judith, you say competition. People are blaming this matter on competition. I don't think there is any competitive thing like football or these games that happen in international arena. They are very competitive, they're emotional, people put in a lot of money. But FIFA has come up with very clear rules and regulations. For example, have you ever seen a policeman in a stadium with a gun? Maybe in Africa here. In fact, the first time is recently when Cameroon was playing Kenya here in Nambole. They were using our stadium, Nambole Stadium, as a neutral stadium. When they were escorting this player called Onana, and it brought a lot of problems. FIFA saw some gunmen, Ugandan gunmen, in the pitch. It is not allowed. In fact, there is very serious security in a football stadium, but managed by stewards. They are called stewards.
That's correct. Yeah.
These stewards are trained to manage crowds who are civilians, and they do it very good in that stadium.
No, crowds that might include army or police officers, security people, but who are unarmed.
Yes.
Yes.
If you look at, for example, in Africa here, we don't have big stadiums, but if you went to Europe, maybe the big one in East Africa is in Tanzania, that Nyerere International Taifa Stadium is about 63,000, but you don't see an army man there, and nobody has fought there. They have not killed each other. And if you see the rivalry between Simba and Yanga, I have never seen it anywhere in Africa. That is a rivalry. A kid is born like this, you are either Simba or Yanga. Whether you are in Musoma, whether you are in Kilwa, they have their local teams, but you must be Yanga or Simba. Although Yanga is so much attached to CCM, and sometimes people think if you're a supporter of Yanga, you're a CCM. But you don't see policemen there. We can manage to put that in our elections. Remember, again, I want to remind you history. When police was still managed by police officers in Uganda here, the last police officer to manage police was Kisembo, who followed Odomel. But Odomel, Kisembo was there for a very short while. Then later we now introduced these generals, policemen.
The current IGP is a policeman.
No, but also military trained.
Biakagawa?
Yes.
Really?
Seriously, military trained. So you remember in the first elections, NRC going up to CA. On election, they did not allow a gunman, a person with a gun. Police used to manage those rallies, those what with the batons. In fact, in rallies, it was baton working. This militarization of things has been caused by a stake where the government thinks that, they think if you are not careful, it may go away. So everything in Uganda, by the way, it's not only politics. Everything in Uganda is now militarized, even giving seedlings in the village there. The man must have AK-47 with the seedlings here, and you wonder what seedlings are going to do. I mean, a gun is going to do to seedlings. You look at for example, other things where, for example, people in church, people just going to church.
That is true, actually. People
in church, there is a bishop or somebody has come. You find the people have come as if there is a battle. Those things covered there. These are churchmen singing Hallelujah, Jesus. A gunman wants to come here and do what? Because there, in the church, they are supposed to be managed by ushers. They are church ushers, very organized people. But everything in Uganda, for example, somebody said that if a hammer is for a carpenter, a gun is to Yoweri Museveni. He thinks that everything can be resolved. I don't agree with my senior colleague, the Honourable, that he's not aware. He's aware, and when people complain to him, he says these soldiers must be allowed to do their work and create order. NRA is the one which brought peace here. So you cannot say NRA should not be in these things. He believes in that NRA revolution. And NRA revolution is not a revolution of where people sit and debate, is a battle for the gun. In fact, I have been thinking, for example, why don't they allow us? Because now it is very dangerous. You are not sure whether you are safe in Uganda, because a person comes under normal police law, arresting somebody has a procedure. Somebody comes with a warrant card, shows you the warrant card, say to show that he's a police officer, and the next pronouncement is that you have committed, you are suspected to have committed an offense, and therefore have been sent to arrest you. My name is Ojambo Robert from Ginger Road Police. Do you have anything to say? Do you have anybody to speak to? That is the procedure. But now they have abandoned that. They just come, men looking like M23. They put you in a vehicle. It doesn't have a number plate. They don't know where they are taking you. You are going to appear either frail or beaten if you are lucky, or never to appear again. So that's why I think, why don't they allow us a license that each one of us now should get a gun? When people come, you struggle. The ones who lose is the one who is taken, so that we know. Other than leaving us, people to come, they kidnap you, they kidnap your brother, they kidnap your child because of a political contestation. I find that very unfair. And for me, I started with this story of this Agaba man who burnt up himself at parliament. And you may think this is you see, by the time somebody burns himself, he has given up, but he wants to do something. For us, we have a saying in our language that when you are attacked by a lion, you don't just sit and allow that the lion eats you. You at least rub yourself in the soil so that it also struggles. When it is eating you, it eats some dirty flesh or has to clean it first. So I think what you are saying, Honourable Dong, that you see the NRA, also there are normally fights. I want you to look at these things carefully. For example, there was a conflict in Kisoro recently. How many people disappeared? How many people went to police? How many people died?
On that note, just wind up, because our producers are saying it's time.
But look at the situation in Kawempe. Elections have not yet started. We are just processing. We are nominating. We have not yet gone into campaigns. We have not yet gone into rallies. But so far, Sarah is telling you 5 people are already shot. There are so many who have disappeared. There are so many who are in police custody. The candidate, instead of concentrating to write his manifesto and prepare, he's in hospital. For sure. Where have you seen this? I have seen NRA that there are always some skirmishes, but they don't go to this level. Why? The military always sides with them. Now it is confused when it is them alone. For example, you saw the thing in Tungamu, where you had this Rukutana and the other lady. The army would even find this one is coming with a garrison, the other one comes, they just salute each other and go away. Because what do you do in that case? But this one is normally one-sided. Of course, I want to end with this, that some political parties also breed some sort of violence. For example, in Kampala here, there are so many outfits. Solidar, there was Solidar, there is now Foot Soldier. So I think when Museveni hears Foot Soldier, says another soldier. So this one you must. So we need to be a little careful. We need to be a little careful.
Thank you very much, Robert. I'll give you a minute to respond to this when we return from the break. This is the Citizens Chat Show. We'll be back shortly.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices, and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive socio-economic and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
A warm welcome to you once again, and glad that you're still with us here on the Citizens Chat Show. My name is Judith Atim once again, and we're discussing the Kawempe By-Election and the NRM plan to reintroduce the trial of civilians in military courts. But before we go into the second bit of our discussion, before we went into the break, Robert, you introduced the aspect of the emergence of gangs in our politics as well, and what basically the broader implications of this new development. But when you talk about the gangs, of course, if you're to profile the people who belong to these gangs, young people, unemployed in most cases, and not very well educated, perhaps illiterate or semi-illiterate.
Or disgruntled political
exactly. Yeah. And then I want to tie this to the question of bitterness that you've all talked about, the anger, the pent-up emotions that we see simmering, coming up to the surface lately, whether it's on social media or in physical spaces, small conversations with people. That anger is something that won't escape your attention. You've mentioned Agaba's incident twice since the recording started, the young man who set himself alight before outside Parliament and these are all, of course, indications. They might look like isolated incidents, but somewhere there's a thread, I think, that connects these issues. Honourable, the emergence of these gangs, is it something that you are concerned about? And if so, how? But also to the rest of you, how do we de-escalate the kinds of tensions and anger that we see cropping up among young people? I watched a YouTube video not long ago of a young boy who was threatening, killings and beheadings and things like that.
So before I comment about the gangs. Allow me first of all to address myself to what Dr. Ojambo had initially said about the situation in Kawempe and then that in Kisoro. For me, I think in principle, violence has got to be addressed in our body politics. It will not make a lot of sense for us even to try and say the one in Kisoro was a little bit, and then the one of Arua was a bit on this high. You can't compare it to this one. It's all violence, and it has no place in our politics. So we need to sanitize the politics. That is the, that's the message that I want really, really, that we as Ugandan citizens should address ourselves to. Now, gangs. You see, there has been, again, it comes down to what I said initially, that, our elections are steeped in a very, very bad culture, and we have seen it coming. Now, it has found expression in things like gangs now. So we have political gangs, and they can codename themselves in whichever way they wish. Trouble is that the intensification of this, what would be civil political differences, could escalate and manifest themselves in actual violence, where we do not have space for civil discourse. And politics largely is about discussion. It's a debate. Where you do not have civil debates, then you're not going to listen to each other's viewpoint. So, we should be worried about the intensity of our politics that has found manifestation in gangs. In Haiti, we have gangs that are formed around drug trafficking. Others are controlling some trade routes and so on and so forth. And they took over the city. Now it's a real global crisis. I've seen even Kenya has had to deploy troops in Haiti. It can happen anywhere. The template is the same, that, as long as there are unresolved political questions, and we do not provide sufficient, a very, very conducive environment for those with differences, for those with serious concerns, to air them out in a civil way, and they are addressed in a very civil political forum, then you are going to see these gangs coming up, and they will even emerge and they will take different formations. Each of them will be organized along their specific interest in their specific locations. Now, you don't want a situation like that one in a country like ours. So we should all be concerned, and this is a political question that should be addressed politically. It then becomes a security question when it escalates and transforms into violence. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I may come in, and I agree with the Honourable Judge's submission, but you cannot cure any problem without addressing the root causes. As much as Uganda has been characterized by this turbulence since our history, like the preamble says, what is the cause today? There has been violence in all parts of Uganda. Each election, there is a region with a big share of this violence. But who controls the tools of violence? There could be emerging gangs, and I've observed 3 cycles of elections. Electoral violence is caused by the state. The military, number 1. Police, because of their inaction, failure to stop the military. But violence is caused by the military in our elections today. In the last election, we had the notorious Brigadier Sunday in Masaka, openly terrorizing citizens, making scandalous statements in support of President Museveni. Do you know what happened? Immediately after elections, he was promoted. By who? President Museveni. So President Museveni is a bigger factor of violence, electoral violence in our elections today. And I can bet that the day he leaves the ballot, there will be no or less violence in our elections. So the call should be directed to President Museveni. Stop entrenching yourself in power using the military in Uganda. And the military, stop violating the fundamental rights and freedoms of people, especially democratic rights. Those are the two problems, the president and the military today.
Yes, Joseph.
Just two quick things. One, George raised this very important point of identity, and I'll talk about the gang shortly. We have to contextualize this, and in part it was I had sort of referred. From independence, we believe that notwithstanding the conflicts we had in the 60s, we had managed, and we're managing to harmonize the nation states. And I think before we came on air, people were even trying to discussing how the deliberate government policies to open up education institutions, and people reasonably intermarried. People went to school from the extreme north to the extreme west, and head teachers like Adonito Barondo, very proud to have been head teacher in the UPC's Teso College, a lawyer, and things like that. And entire school, by the way, entire school and everything. Museveni benefited a lot for support from entire OBs from other parts of the country. So in any way, NRM benefited in part from that. So these things work. But fast forward, and I'm not saying that's the start. When George, and I was here, after the 1980 general elections, in a very deliberate way, one, I think part of what Robert said, Museveni deliberately accused the DP of UPC of being religious and tribal political parties. And apparently, in the formation of the UPM, he usurped the leadership from Makena Pojok, who's actually Nacholi, and kind of told me the story himself. And part of Museveni's argument was that, well, the guys from the north and east have had it, and the guys from Uganda also have it, so I must sort of take it. It's sort of trivializing it to that extent. Fast forward, UPM, leave it there. The journey into Luwero, the narrative, and it's an official narrative, and I've said it on this program because you've not been around me, George, and these things. Again and again and again and again. It was pushed that them versus us. Baganda sentiments were fanned against anti-Bantu, and particularly people from the north and the east, particularly people from the north. I am saying this because, as I said, you see what it happened, what it did. Milton Obote's notion on concealment of genocide in Uganda said it was official NRM policy that other than the army and the police, people in security services in the government at the time, and UPC chairpersons of whatever identity, the next targets in Luwero were people of northern and eastern extraction. NRM, so as a matter of policy, led by Mr. Museveni, it happened. Unfortunately, come 1986, we know what happened, particularly Lang, Acholi, Teso, but particularly whatever happened in Teso. Now, my point is this, that really we are 40 years later on. The tone, for example, of Mr. Museveni's son, of With the Bachwezi, these are open things. Ugandans are, we see these things. It is not being held by a serving army general to push this agenda almost as if them versus us. And I'm saying this for the first time today to push it to that angle. And his father is mum, and Ugandans are watching. Now, in a more recent time, then come the 2021 elections and whatever happened, and the manner in which the majority of the victims, the people who were killed, were Baganda. Now, all of us go into the streets, and as I said, I'm a political leader, absolutely my responsibility to speak out fairly and openly, but to responsibly create a sense of calm in this country. But we can't sort of fudge it, So Baganda bore the brunt of these things. Number two, the biggest the most angry population in this country today are actually Baganda, you know. So why I was contextualizing in my initial submission is that it's absolutely in the interest of NRM that when managing crowds, and of course, these are actually from intelligence and actual security services, they will have it, you know, including education, that if you're going to talk to a particular child, that one is a stubborn one, this one is a dirty one. In Gongora those days, they used to pick some of the very stubborn boys, and then they choose them deputy health prefects. So you know immediately make him a deputy health prefect.
He has to be clean.
He has to begin now to be clean and calm. So I'm simply saying that whatever happens, there are many other ways that we could skin and challenge and check whatever was happening in Kawempe. And as I said, the reaction from Kawempe are almost certainly going to be different from reactions that you'll possibly find in Ojambo, or in this case in Torah. That's all I'm saying. But these things are there, and people talk about these things. Whether we board Uber, we board border, you go to border stages, you go to supermarkets, you have conversations with people. Once people have confidence in you, you stop at metro stations, talk to people. These things are there. Tribal things, so-called identity things, they're real in this country. The leadership has got to come from the top and has got to come from Mr. Museveni. The tone from him as head of state must be one of reconciliation. I'll say it again, that actually at his age, he does very well. And usually when you hit 70, when you hit 60, when you hit Museveni's age, it is very easy. I talked about Ted Heath, you know, the terrible British Prime Minister who gave us Idi Amin. As I said, I nearly would vote for him by the time he became Father of the House in British Parliament. He was that civil. He could say, you know, we need this. The color count, he came to me, the Prime Minister, you know, the Foreign Secretary came to me. I disagreed with, oh, we made a mistake. And he became an opposition reason party because he was now the voice of reason for the country, you know, so seeing into the future. So it's actually possible for us to have this identity conversation, but the identity conversation must be seen to be done in a state in which we are actually operating fairly, but also taking responsibility for our children and children's children going forward. Now, on the question of gangs, I'll be brief since, you know, I think we're running out of time. No, gangs apparently, these are political, social, and economic realities. Officially, social scientists will tell you that our root cause of gangs, in Uganda's case, is an absolute manifestation, an indictment, a terrible indictment of 40 years of an NRM failure. 1, broken family. 2, poor education. 3, alcoholism. 4, unemployment. 5, drugs. 6, groupings of money, and where there has been a failure of social order in communities, and then people begin to go to do football kind of thing and begin to gamble. Talk about all those manifestations. You see them in the streets, slums, you see them in the streets of Kampala. So it's not surprising that those are the realities, and these are concepts, and I think you refer to Haiti. You know, I talk as someone who 30 years ago was a mentor in Britain, mentoring young black boys in secondary schools. And part of the thing was conversations of trying to lure black African kids away from gangs. I didn't know I would return to Uganda and find a Ugandan child have any semblance of concept of gangs, because they're very dangerous. They're very dangerous stuff. You know, the Haiti things and whatever it is, in those Western European, that dangerous stuff, we need to fight it, we need to deal with it. But the underlying causes are economical, the underlying causes are social. Now, if you find gangs emerging, and the climate Sarah is talking about is one in which the politics is not harmonized. Communities, people feel grievances, the emerging grievances. They'll feed into this. And once you feed into those, you get broken society, you break lawless nations, you get impossible Haitis, and you get the kind of a republic that people normally try to blackmail us over Iraq, over Libya, and over Sudan. And a post-Museveni Uganda in which many top people in NRM, you try very hard, Joy, but many people in NRM, more senior guys in NRM, and much more people in key positions, don't want to discuss a post-Museveni Uganda, don't want to discuss national reconciliation, possibilities of harmonizing our future. It means that when a treat, an ex-statement comes and gets out of hand, and the situation arises in which tomorrow we wake up and we don't know where the leadership is, we might end up with a very messy Uganda.
Thank you. Thank you, Joseph. I think it's now time for us to move on to the next discussion. I'll also give you the opportunity to come back to this issue because what we are discussing is still not far away from here. We're talking about the reintroduction of the trial of civilians in military courts. And we know last Friday, again, you'll tell us the discussions you had at caucus one more time. Caucus, the NRM Parliamentary Caucus was at State House. Again, the biggest issue, once again, was the amendment of the UPDF Act, and largely to get the unified party's position on what to include. So far, there have been 2 meetings, just a few weeks apart, on the same issue. And this is coming from the Supreme Court ruling that it is unconstitutional to try civilians in the military courts. But by and large, there is a growing concern by Ugandans that the ruling party wants to leverage its numerical strength in the House and go against the ruling of the Supreme Court using whatever tactic it has at its disposal. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what we want to focus on in the remaining minutes. But I'll just read the statement that was released, I think, the day after that caucus meeting by Honourable Hamson Obua. Basically, the issues that caucus agreed on to support the proposed amendments to the UPDF Act as presented by the Attorney General with the following broad principles: that misconduct by serving military personnel be tried in the first instance by the military courts martial with a right of appeal through the civilian courts. 2, that civilians who acquire specified firearms illegally be tried by the military courts martial in the first instance with a right of appeal through the civilian courts. And 3, that provision be made to provide for rights of appeal from decisions of courts martial to civilian courts. This was it, right? Honourable Odongo, did you attend? You attended the
Yes,
second caucus?
So those are the 3 major ones.
The 3 major ones, yes. This is what was shared. I opened the floor. I'm not going to throw a question, but I'm just opening the floor
Let's hear from the horse's mouth.
Okay. The horse. Let's hear from your mouth.
You're making me the horse.
Because you were there. No one. We are only following what was shared, what we are hearing. But you heard, you attended, you participated. So your insights are really important to also shape the discussion that we're having.
You see, what doesn't come in the public domain is the intensity of discussions that take place in the caucus. And I think it's a beautiful thing to have a caucus. It is considered a safe place to disagree and disagree in principle on some of the things, but also a safe place to agree on certain things. But in the end, the official spokesperson has released the statement, and you have read the ingredients of the amendments as proposed, and the official position of the caucus on them. But there were discussions around one, whether or not the amendment of the UPDF Act would offend the Constitution with respect to the fact that you cannot, you cannot come up with a legislation to defeat a ruling of the Supreme Court. And the counsel that the caucus was given was that, the law does not work retrospectively. And once the Supreme Court rules, you cannot contradict it. But it gives you an opportunity to focus on the future, because there are others, in the rulings, there were some other advisories. So that was one of the areas that members focused on. The other was about civilians. And there are quite a number of members of parliament who came to give their personal stories, how they have experienced violence, gun violence, but whose cases have been either defeated in the civilian courts, or have taken a long time and died a natural death, or have been frustrated. And the reason why they are supporting the idea that this should be a matter that should be brought to the court martial. There was also another point about those who acquire arms legally. And in the proposed amendment that the Attorney General read out, he said those who acquire guns legally and misuse them should be tried in the civilian court. So the question was, what are we addressing? So the debate was, what are we addressing? Because all of these people have misused the gun. This is a civilian. Even if he acquired the gun legally, he has used it illegally, because he has either used it for robberies. In fact, there are some members who say most of the cases involving land conflicts and so on and so forth, you will find that a person who acquired a gun is a civilian, acquired a gun legally, is using that gun to threaten another person. How do you deal with those cases? Why would you take them to civilian courts if all of them have, because this person is not a uniformed person, so he should also be tried in a court martial. So those are some of the areas that the caucus dealt with. But if you ask my own personal view, probably that is very important, because I really want to speak for myself on this matter. I think that for me the question should be, how do we, one, strengthen our legal system so that whether you are a subject of a court martial or you are a subject of a civilian court, because the idea that because the civilian courts have failed, because they have so many cases, they are subject to all manner of manipulation and so on and so forth. It's like we are giving a vote of no confidence in our civilian courts, and to think that we can only have confidence if it is in a court martial,
in a kangaroo court.
No, I don't want to call it so, but so for me, I do not want to cause a friction between these two institutions. What I want is justice. The court martial was envisaged for service offenses. We also have our civilian courts that are meant to dispense justice. Those who are in our civilian courts are as good as those who go into the court martials. All of them are seeking justice. And therefore, if we are putting effort, we should be putting effort in the whole justice system, so that I have no problem if my case, by our constitution or by our laws, requires that I go into a court martial, I'm taken to court martial. If it is that I'm going to a civilian court, I should go to a civilian court, but I'm aware that I will receive justice. That justice must be fast, it must be fair, it must be seen. Justice is justice. So the idea that we need to outsource every solution to the military, I think, is a very bad thing for our institutions, because it gives us a confidence problem with our institutions. It means, therefore, that for every situation that we are faced with as a country, we need to look for which military outfit can we have to solve it, So if it's a land question, then we have got a land unit within the UPDF to deal with it. If it's an investors problem, then we need to have an investors unit within the UPDF to deal with investors. If it is an oil question, then we have an oil army. If it's a tourism, then we have a tourism army. So the over-militarization of these institutions, for me, is the malaise that is affecting our, and I can tell you, people don't want to speak about it, you know, but it is a conversation that is very intense internally. We didn't have the chance to talk about it within the caucus, but you would get the feeling that people really wanted to deal with the elephant in the room. It's about how do we have institutions functioning effectively so that we are not running around to look for UPDF, because UPDF has demonstrated capacity in roads, in something, and then we think that every problem that we have has got to be solved using a military approach.
I
So
can
for
assure
me,
you, even there, they don't have a capacity.
so personally, my view is that we are grappling with the real elephant in the room is that we need justice, an effective justice system. And it should be seen in the civilian courts, and it should also be seen in the military courts.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I think it is a personal submission, not that of the caucus. It is fair enough. But what are we dealing with? Ugandans need not to beat about the bush. We are faced with a leadership crisis in Uganda. Today, the only right thing to do and the most important discussion to have is a transition. The rest is to beat about the bush. The rest is to prescribe Panadol for malaria. President Museveni has given this country his best. In some instances, his best was not good enough. He has done what he could as a person. All his ideas have hit a stalemate. I don't think there is any new idea he can come up with. He needs to be fair to Uganda and organize transition. But going back to the subject, so for me, that's the elephant in the room. Going back to the question of militarizing justice, the Supreme Court was very clear. And I opened the decree for purposes of this discussion. Decree number 1, declaring sections 1191G, which is now 1171G of the UPDF Act, unconstitutional. What does this section say? That any person not otherwise subject of military law who aids and abates a person subject to military law in the commission of service offense should be subject of court-martial. If you read the amendment, what the framer of those amendments, because I know Attorney General is involved, I know the line Minister of Defense, Honourable Jacobo, both used to be an upright lawyer. I don't know his state now. So when you read that proposed amendment, they've just added that if you aid or abate, then you are given a title of a private to make you subject of court-martial to defeat the ruling. So they are going to forcefully recruit Ugandans in the UPDF. The regulations for recruiting Ugandans are clear. It must be voluntary consent of a person, but they are now forced assumed consent and bestowing the rank of a private on people. The second amendment, so they are just trying to dodge around the Supreme Court decision. But the meaning is the same. That's the only thing they are adding on these outlawed sections of the law. That if you are found in possession of equipment, if you aid and abet, or you're found in possession of equipment, or possession of equipment, ordinary monopoly of UPDF, then you are also assumed to be a private, and then you will be subject to court martial.
Can you imagine?
They are just making fools of Ugandans. Then the third amendment they've added, and that one specifically targets Besigye, that if you retired from the army, then you are assumed to have committed these crimes. Then the rank at which you retired will be restored and you'll be subject
By force.
of court martial. Can you imagine? Those are the three major amendments. The fourth one is then they trying to say the people who occupy the bench are lawyers and whatever, still below the threshold provided by the Supreme Court, because they are saying they should be lawyers with the practice there, but being a lawyer alone does not entitle you to be a judge. No. So still the threshold I've seen in the amendments is below what is required for service offenses. It's below what was recommended for military service offenses. But the caucus is trying to overthrow the Constitution. And you don't need to look far. Just look at the statements of the president and his son, who are in charge of the military. The president immediately said, and by the way, he was briefed on 24th about the Supreme Court decision. That's 1 week before the judgment was released. Although he quarreled with whoever briefed him, then after it's whatever released, the next day I've been briefed, on the telephone called by Attorney General, the court have issued the wrong decision. That's where President Museveni overthrew the Constitution, that statement. And if we had a serious parliament, they should have presumed impeachment proceedings. How does a head of executive say that the most powerful court in the land, the Supreme Court, has issued a wrong decision? Who had a right decision and who should have issued it? Meaning that he thinks his mind as an individual is above that of judiciary, is above the Constitution, and he's now gagging the caucus to reenact things outlawed by the Supreme Court, outlawed by the Constitutional Court, and prohibited by the Constitution. We shall hold them accountable.
Thank you, Dr. Sarah. Yes, Dr. Ojambo.
You know, the French Revolution in France did not happen because at that time, that is when the French people were facing problems that were most serious. But it is because the then King of France, Louis XVI, was a weak leader. Those problems had been in France for over 400 years. The social divisions, the bourgeois, domination of everything by the bourgeois and the nobility and so many. But Louis XVI was a weak leader. For example, one of the statements that annoyed the people is when he said, "I am the state and the state is me. C'est moi, c'est moi." That is what annoyed the people. They said, "Oh, really? You, man?" And it is the same thing that is happening here. You have been listening to NRM MPs who were in the caucus. Before they went there, they were arguing differently. I saw one called Brandon, who is their publicity, was saying, "I cannot agree things of taking civilians to the court martial." When he came back, he was now giving those explanations that he tried to explain in the first instance, which in my view, or philosophically, they are wish-wash. They don't make sense. Because you cannot say that the court martial is better than the whole justice system in Uganda, from magistrate 1 to the Supreme Court, that thing in Machinde, that Ramchakol thing, can be a replacement of that justice system. You need to first give people alcohol, then you cane them. After caning them, you put their legs in cold water. Then you say, "Now, do you understand?" You say, "Now we understand you." But sensible ones will even tell you it is not true. It will not be true.
Even after that.
After all that torture, they will not accept. So for me, I think the biggest problem is treating a state as a human being. And that is the problem that we have in Africa, generally. when you look at these African states. And whoever is running the state now thinks that the state is his property. And you know, when you have a right to make decision on your property, that one at least you allowed. But the state, in most cases, is supposed to be it is not a possession of somebody. In other words, we would be in trouble. Once the state becomes you and you become the state, as I started, then there becomes a problem. You want a leader who should run this state in trust of the people. And therefore, you don't do things because of your feelings. Because now you can imagine a whole law is being tampered with because of the thinking of some people. There's an MP who was convincing me that, you see, this court martial has solved the problem in Karamojong. Then I said, look at this one. The problem in Karamojong has been here since the colonial time.
Just today, the army has shot 5 people in Teso.
Since 1926.
The army has shot 5 people in Teso today.
Since 1926, when Karamojong was joined to be part of the protectorate of Uganda, there have been problems there, cattle rustling, all those problems have been there. And they have used different methods to remove them. They have failed. Do you know Karamojong is the only part of the country in Uganda here where the division, the 3rd division, is purposefully put there not to defend the borders of the country, but to manage the Karamojong activity of cattle rustling. When you are put there as a commandant of that division, 3rd division, that is the first thing they tell you. So Karamojongs are not managed by civil policemen and these other things. They are managed by a division. And therefore, the research shows that in 1 year, 300 Karamojongs die because of the fight with the government. Now go to Kenya, where we have the neighbors, the Karamojongs. They are called the Pokot. The Pokot are managed by a police state in Kenya. They are managed by a police state. And there have been even accusations that because of the loose nature they manage the Pokot in Kenya, that's why guns cross into Uganda. But how come the guns are more dangerous in Uganda than in Pokot area? Because of our thinking that everything can be managed. And convincing me that I have never agreed with that decision because it does not hold water. Me, I think there is no community in Uganda which you must have a legislation to manage them. I have not seen that community yet. So that thing. And then the second one was that you see there are people who get arms and harm people when they take them to these civilian courts. So the civilian courts then should be closed. Why do you expose us to these weak things? Close them and bring another system. So for me, I think the issue in court, if you remember, colleagues, the issue in court, which covers Guruka, I hope to have pronounced it properly,
Well done.
took to the Constitutional Court was, can a civilian be tried in a military court? And the Constitution said it is unconstitutional. So this bending of saying, you see, when we find you, we shall give you a rank. This is it is treachery. That is treachery. In fact, that's what they were charging Besige. So me, I think somebody is just becoming clever. That is a clever action, which is not good for running a state.
Clever treasury.
I really think, in my view, that NRM and the government right now should abandon that matter and take the advice that was given by the Supreme Court, by one, saying that let the military court martial remain a disciplinary committee to deal with the discipline of serving officers. If somebody has committed an offense which is of capital nature, that person should be taken to a competent court. There is a criminal division which can handle that matter. Number two, they advised, if they want to run it at a level of a court and propose it to be one of the court systems in Uganda, then they should enact a law. That's the first thing. Two, that law would show how you get the officers of the court, of that specific court, using our judicial system, and declare it as one of the courts in article in article what?
No, Article 129
Yes.
says the courts of record in Uganda
Yes.
are High Court, Court of Appeal, and Supreme Court.
Yes.
Supreme Court, yeah.
So it would become subordinate.
Yes, to one or
it wouldn't be a court of record.
Okay, it would be subordinate. Number three. This one they didn't declare, but one of the judges was even wondering if a soldier has committed an offense. For example, he has gone to take alcohol in a bar and he boxes someone. Should you take him to a court martial, or that is a normal penal code issue? Because it's not on his line of duty as a soldier. He has gone to take alcohol, or he has gone to watch football, or he has gone to steal. That is a thief. He is no longer another person. So for me, I think, and I know they are going to manipulate it, and you see when people go for that caucus, they go there when they are very reasoned human beings. They are thinking, they are saying, this one we are not going to accept. When they come back, they announce funny things. Like, for example, you can see those things that were now announced. Now, I have never stepped in a law class, or I only read legal things. But I think, in my view, already they have they are in contempt of that ruling. Even just thinking about tuning those things and adding there that you should be a private. Really, they are just acting clever. So me, I really think that we have major problems in this country. There are so many problems in this country. And for those who study criminality and law and other things, this criminality and the conflict and violence is mainly a socio-economic issue of a country. We have so many issues that we need to be, the caucus should be discussing. How do we, for example, improve on our education system? Because that's the first thing to begin with. If you want to deal with everything, the caucus should be spending most of the time. How do we increase the numbers of industries? Not these funny things that are being promoted here. Industries that can produce for us goods and services and also employ our people. How can we need to deal with the Karamojongs, for example. Why are the Karamojongs tied in cattle rustling? It's because of their socioeconomic setting. How do we change that? Yeah. We want a caucus which is discussing not how Karamojongs are going to be tried and sentenced to death by a court martial. Really, are you solving any problem? Karamojongs have been shot since 1926. The cattle rustling thing has not ended until we change their economic status and improve them, take them to school, and do many things there. They are not going to stop being cattle rustlers. They will continue being cattle rustlers. You just have to create another court again. Lastly, for me, I think in Uganda, the biggest problem that we have, and this is the character of the state and the character of the person who runs the state, of not accepting defeat. In life, there are times you must accept that this one, I have been defeated. Let me start on a new slate. On this matter of court martial, I don't think Ugandans like it. And if Ugandans like it, just let them try it. I want to engage the NRM caucus people. Can you put this in your manifestos? That for me, if you elect me, I am going to make sure that civilians are tried in a court martial. And we see.
Thank you. Joseph.
Manifestos. Guys, you need to remind me about Karamojong. Two things. One is that the elephant in the room is definitely NRA and NRA dictatorship, and as I said, the steering of the ship. And if I didn't actually include that, it is actually true that we need to urgently have a conversation around the national transition, as Sarah said. You guys, Mr. Museveni is genuinely tired. The guy is tired. And like a senior NRM friend confided once upon a time a few months ago, that if you really haven't done it in 40 years, you know, governments run over 5-year period, George. Many other democracies, there are 4. And in fact, some parliaments, particularly before the UK instituted a fixed term parliament, sometimes certain parliaments ran for just less than 3 years. And they still delivered, ran on their manifestos and programs, and still won elections convincingly. So if you really, really haven't done it in 40 years, even if you're given another 100, you will not do it. So I think let's, guys, be honest and open and have this conversation. There is a stalemate somewhere at the top. Most of the members of the NRM parliamentary caucus are basically victims. And we understand this, you know, without any iota of doubt. Now, I have argued here, and I've argued elsewhere, and I think all of us have, that the suggestion by Mr. Museveni, which was quite insulting to the Karamojong actually, about this court-martial thing versus the Karamojong, and I'll come back to the Karamojong very specifically on the solution in terms of way forward, is that it's an indictment on the judicial system, as it has been suggested. But
by who?
Of course, self-indictment. Let us resource and equip the judiciary. Let us resource and equip the police. Let us resource and equip the investigative arm of the police. Let us resource and equip the DPP, make them competent, make them sufficiently resourced to do their work, you know. But we know that in some cases, it's not about that. It's just about, you know, absence of goodwill. We have cases where these guys will run for over within 2-3 days when it favors the establishment. And we've got cases that should take a few weeks and they take 4, 5, 10 years. We know it. I'm tired of making specific references, you know. So that really is the answer, and it's not court-martial. And then I'm also one of those people who now put up my hand. I genuinely, after the court-martial ruling, was really, really nearly close to confident that that was a closed matter and that we would not be discussing it. And I genuinely thought that the NRA guys would not, NRA, but particularly NRA ones, you know, those are the core guys, would not, you know, think of really ever making the attempts that they're now wasting our resources on in terms to push some of these amendments. And you're absolutely right that some of the people who are pushing these things are people whom we know and we knew, some of them friends, that they should be much more reasonable than that. Now, yesterday, Thursday, I was at the funeral service of John Cosmos Odomel, the former Inspector General of Police. And the other week, I was at the burial of former Inspector General Okoth-Ogola, who happened to be a maternal relative. And the conversation at Okoth-Ogola's was to talk to IGPs and Assistant Inspector Generals and the Civil Commissioner, some friends and people who know, and to actually assure them how much we've been, including this program of yours, Judith, campaigning for pushing more resources to areas of health, education, and also policing, including their welfare. And I promised them that we would continue doing that. That was the other day at Okoth-Ogola's. Now, interestingly, yesterday at Ntinda, guess what?
Are they related?
You know, in terms of what? No, they're not related. Odomel is Mteso.
No, Okoth-Ogola and the
Okoth-Ogola and Okoth-Ochola. No, they're not related.
Okay.
And they're not related. But nor is Odomel. Odomel is from Teso.
Okay.
But ironically, all the three are Bakedi, from Old Bukedi,
yes.
as a matter of interest. But look, The point is this. At the Odomel service, both Kale Kaihura, in response to Mike Mukula, who was a former health minister, we're talking about the fact that Kenya has 5 big machines that helps to detect cancer, certain elements of cancer. Tanzania has procured once, thanks to Magufuli coming in recently, and that Uganda has none. Odomel died in India. This is public information. So
We don't have a machine.
we don't have.
What does the Cancer Institute have?
And so
There is one which was donated,
a particular
but
machine,
it cannot.
and this was authoritatively yesterday by both Mukula and Kale Kaihura, that these particular basic machines, at a certain level, I didn't have to take the health bit of it, in terms of technical detail. Uganda doesn't have it. Mukula was saying, I think they're trying to procure it privately for a private facility in Uganda. Maybe by the end of the year, they'll have it. Now, these are 2 guys, and this is an NRM regime after 40 years.
Because our
you
concentration is militarization.
You know, and as I say, these are the challenges we face as a country. Misallocation of our resources, misdirection of our resources, and misfocus of our priorities, national priorities. Now, quickly on Karamojong, by the way, as a matter of information, and you know, George comes from not far from Karamojong, so they're personal experiences and fairly informed experiences, and you know about the experience of Karamojong. But as a matter of fact, in 1985, by the 1985 coup, George, UPC government was about to stop, and this is official, check, they were about to stop this Karamojong rustling. And I was given this by somebody from Napak, a Karamojong elder who unfortunately passed, I think, 6 months or so ago. You know, when we were having my budget debates, it became a major issue, and it became a little bit of a tiny little star in Karamojong. So these things reached out, and some people reached out to me, and these are elders from Karamojong. So apparently, the Obote II government took this approach, that local chiefs, community leaders, would engage these people, constructive engagements, and people, the guns were bought them off, and people were guaranteed security for their cattle. And part of a further deal that I don't know some of the other details was such that actually communities settled, and harmoniously local chiefs, county chiefs and sub-county chiefs managed to quell these things leading to the coup. It's something that I've gone through an experiment that would work by 2 years. But guess what? In Obote II government, the Minister for Lands, Minerals, and Water Resources was Max Chaldry at Karamojong. Part of the point you're trying to refer. Karamojong, arid, gold, cattle, what are the requirements, cattle deeps and things like that. The irrigation programs of the 60s, which we've discussed in this program several times, that includes part of the cattle dumping in Angola, things like that. Where was it? Part of the background was Karamojong. So what do nation states do in terms of leadership? You have a particular challenge. You think through solutions. So part of the remedy was, how do we have, just like in Acholi, land, you know? So these guys, we've massacred them and subject them to concentration camps after 16 years. They've got huge sway of land. So now, you know, they've come out of concentration camps. They're broken. They don't have money. Now we can pick Balalo on some of us, go ahead and own their land. Instead of responsible government say, look, the community, which is a post-war conflict, in fact, both land and Teso, like include Teso, actually, post-conflict areas. What do? Let's go and enable them to get up themselves. Let them become the specialists of agriculture in Acholi, rather than us going to loot and loot and loot from them. Now, that's the point I'm making. But do you know what Karamojong is? Because he talked about education. In 1970,
we're running out of time.
This is my last statement, could be on that. In 1970, Karamojong was second to Bukede Bugisu, joined first on PLE performance pass rates. Karamojong, 1970 PLE results are sufficient. You know? So what I'm saying, you see, provide education, people will go for alternative ways of livelihoods. And for Karamojong, the answer is not whipping them and then they become guests of the state after you've broken them, like Mr. Museveni says. But no, provide them education, provide them health facilities, provide them alternative systems, create jobs and create industries, and we shall manage the Karamojong situation.
Thank you. You want to respond before Because it's actually time, and
Well,
I now want just concluding remarks. But if you have something you want to say before you conclude, it's okay.
no. I think mine is just to say there's just a crisis of trust and confidence in some of the institutions. And that's what we are dealing with in the broader sense of it. That ordinarily, nobody would care which, whether you're going to a court martial or to a civilian court. Nobody.
How would you go for a court martial?
Just a second. Nobody. If those institutions,
I would care.
those institutions or those, one, are legally constituted, constitutionally constituted, and there is fidelity to the law. And therefore, they dispense justice. It doesn't matter the form. It matters that what they were there for. Okay? Number one is that they are legally there, constitutionally there, of course, and that they are performing exactly what they're supposed to perform. So the problem we're dealing with is actually a trust deficit, because people fear that these courts could turn out to be weaponized for political reasons. Okay, that you could then transform a military court martial into a platform for dealing with the political issues. So that's why I'm telling you that there is a huge trust deficit, public trust deficit on these institutions, and we have got to deal with them. We will not be talking about this if, for example, they were functioning properly. We are talking about this because we suspect that they are being constituted as a weapon to deal with, or as a tool to deal with the political issues. And that goes on and on for other institutions. So we have got to deal with the public confidence and public trust in our institutions, and we have got to build them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And that's your parting shot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I may come in, I would care about any civilian going into court martial, and I do care. Why? Military is part of executive. Executive has no business dispensing matters justice. Let's not sugarcoat this matter. It is as simple as that. In the age limit case, people were asking whether a doctrine of separation of powers is entrenched in our constitution. Both the Constitutional Court and Supreme Court held that separation of powers is part of our basic doctrine structure in the Constitution. So once you alter any component of the doctrine of separation of powers, you are altering the basic structure of the Constitution. The military has no business dispensing justice in Uganda. If some sections of Ugandans want the military to dispense justice, let them overthrow the Constitution.
Joseph, then we'll come to.
No, I think I've almost necessarily concluded. As I said, the reality is this, that we just need to realize that this country belongs to all of us. All of us have an ownership of it, little bits of it. But if it's a country that is going to be led and ruled by the rule of law, the rule of law must apply. I don't want to have anything to... I don't want to share the experience I had, in 1987 under this NRM regime from Makere University. I don't want that kind of experience for any child. And that's one of the reasons why I went on to study conflicts and mastering, and I consider myself a scholar. Conflict is terrible, it's bad. And it just bothers me that people don't seem to learn. And some people, by virtue of certain kind of privilege, think that things cannot happen differently the following day. We're just praying that, look, common sense prevails. We reclaim this country for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Judith, I think when you are looking at these topics that you suggested to us to discuss today, they are related. The issue in Kawempe and the issue at the NRM caucus. I think it is something that I've said that we must accept defeat. The government, the state, and in this case we have the government, the state, and the individual who leads the state, or who leads government and pretends over the state. Of course, they are fused. They are now one thing. Should always know that on this matter, I think my idea has not sailed through. In this area, my candidate may not win, and you accept, and we move on, because we cannot have a uniform society. That's why heads of human beings are not connected like electricity. We would have wires moving from me to this one, to that one, like that, so that when you switch off and all of us keep quiet. But each of us has a head, and therefore it should be allowed to exercise its independence.
Thank you very much, Dr. Robert Ojambo, Dr. Sarah Bireete, Honourable George Odongo, and you, Mr. Joseph Ochieno, for your insights in today's conversation on the Kawempe by-election and the NRM plan to reintroduce the trial of civilians in military courts. This is the Citizens Chat Show. My name is Judith, Atim, your host. Thank you very much for keeping it with us this far. We'll be back next week, same time. For now, it is bye-bye.